Hi, welcome to A City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski, and Your Honor, welcome.
Thank you, Walt. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And you have brought a special guest with you from City Hall, and I'd like to introduce our viewers to Darlene Wynn, who is the Assistant Planning Director for the City of Beverly. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Nice to be here.
And the reason that we have Darlene here with us today is because we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about a master plan for the city of Beverly. And that is a process that is getting underway right now, or has gotten underway. And I'm going to talk to Darlene about that. And maybe for our viewers, Darlene, you could say, explain, what is a master plan? How is it used? Why is it important?
Sure. A master plan is a document. It's a policy document. I like to refer to it actually as a kind of a roadmap. It's a set of recommendations that help chart the course for a community for the next 10, 15, or 20 years. So that's kind of up for us to decide how long we want it to last for. We're assuming usually they're applicable for about 10 years, but it's a comprehensive document that looks at all aspects of the city. So the state prescribes some categories. So land use, housing, economic development, transportation and circulation, let's see if I get them all, open space and recreation, environmental resources and natural resources, cultural and historic preservation and heritage,
Services?
Public services and facilities. There we go. Got them all. So and so those are the kind of chapters or categories that we'll look at. We'll evaluate the existing conditions and kind of look at what's the state of the city right now and under all of those areas, how are we performing, and then go ahead and, with the community, develop a vision for the next 10 to 15 years. And then out of that and out of all the existing conditions analysis and the public process that's tied into this planning process, identify strategies or recommendations for going forward, to recommend, what policy avenues or regulatory changes the city should pursue, what programs the city should look at, and how funds should be allocated in the city, and who's responsible for all those things.
Right. So. Now, the old city master plan, when was that dated? What was the date on that?
The date is 2002.
2002. So
I think we've heard the data and the process was a couple of years before that. I think.
Yeah.
It took a little bit of time to get the final plan approved.
Yeah. So it's kind of exceeded its shelf life. If
yes.
I heard what you said before.
We've been using it.
Yeah.
We've still referenced it, and some of the recommendations and strategies seem pretty valid, and maybe we're ahead of their time at the moment. But yeah, it's time to, and I don't know if the mayor wants to speak to this too, but we felt like it's time to take a new look at the master plan. Our community has changed a lot in that time period,
Sure.
So it's a good time to do that.
Right. Now you have put together, I know, a steering committee. Tell us about that, Darlene.
Well, we have a steering committee. It's a group of, say, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 residents and business representatives, nonprofit representatives from all different areas of the city. And they're there to kind of guide us, provide some input outside of city staff. So we're working with a consultant that we've hired to help do a lot of the legwork on the plan, because it is a lot of data analysis and kind of behind the scenes work. And so the steering committee will serve to kind of vet what they hear from both the consultant and city staff as we work through this.
And who's the consultant, Darlene?
The consultant is UTIL, and they are an architecture and planning firm. They're based in Boston. They've done some big projects some projects in some bigger cities like Boston and Cambridge, but they've also worked for smaller communities like Hingham.
Right. And you were saying, sorry, I cut you off. You were saying that you'll distill what you hear from city and from them, but you're also including the public, right?
Yes.
So you're not neglecting input from the public.
they're
Tell us
really-
how you're doing that.
Yeah, I'll say that we gave the steering committee kind of two roles. One was to be this kind of vetting process for the documents and the information, but also to be a big part of the engagement and public outreach. So we want them to help us reach more people. But one of I think the biggest part of this planning process that I think feel very strongly about is that we reach as many people as possible and bring as many people as possible into this process, so that there's a sense of buy-in. We've established with the consultant a series of kind of checklists of all these different engagement opportunities. So they're on next Tuesday, May 14th, we're going to have our first public workshop and kickoff meeting at 7 p.m. at the Senior Center.
Okay.
And we will have 3 more of those kind of traditional, I would call them, evening meetings. But we do find that not everybody wants to or can make that type of meeting. So we're also going to be out at events like Homecoming or Arts Fest to have tables where people can come to us. We will also go out and go out into the neighborhoods, and we're hoping to have a couple different neighborhood meetings, some smaller focus groups with key demographics, and also we're going to bring it online. So there'll be an online mapping tool where people can just go in and comment on this interactive tool, say, I like this here, or I don't like this, or I see this as an opportunity. So that will be really interesting. We haven't used something like that in Beverly before. And of course, there'll be surveys, and surveys will be available both online or in paper in our office and probably at the library and other locations.
And if I may mention, BevCam will be in the Senior Center on May 14th to tape that event, so that, again, if people are not able to attend in person, we will be airing that on BevCam so that people can catch up on what's new. So it sounds like it's a very, very comprehensive effort. And do you have a timeline for when you might have like a final, bound volume?
We've been given a very strict schedule from the mayor. So
by the mayor.
Our goal has always been to have this complete within a year's time. So to be able to have it by, we're aiming for spring of next year, but to have some material in January of next year that we can really start acting on. So throughout the spring and summer, there'll be the education, listening, and visioning part of the plan, and then in the fall, the consultant will really go back and start writing things.
Right.
And we'll have another opportunity to come back to the public with some strategies and recommendations, but we're hoping that by January, there might be some things that we can start acting on. And although we might not have the final draft of the plan, sometimes it takes a while just to get through the versions of the plans that we want to have before summer next year.
Well, from what you described as the contents, that's very, very comprehensive and a lot to consider. And you touched on it briefly, but can I ask you again, darling, why right now? What urged the city or prompted the city to start working on a master plan at this point in time?
Well, I think primarily because ours has been, it's 2002, so it's pretty old, and also because of what's going on, and there's been a lot of development in recent years, a lot of changes downtown. We've accomplished some of the things from the last master plan, so it's a good time to sit back and say, all right, now what next, or how do we want to see the city going forward? What are our next opportunities?
Very good, very good. Yeah. Mr. Mayor, Your Honor, you've been sitting there. So any comments? Do you want to add something to what Darlene has talked about?
We could. It's funny because before we went on the air, we said, well, let's not spend the whole 30 minutes on the master plan. Let's talk about other things. But we really could talk about it all day. As Darlene said, our master plan, and it's a really well put together master plan that we've been leaning on and using for the last 15 or so years. And so we've been in office for me and the team that we've got for just over 5 years, and we had some other things we had to focus on initially.
Sure.
But we kept looking and saying, geez, our master plan is coming up to the point where we really need to undertake the broader community conversation. So we decided this is the year to do it. let's have as much of a conversation as we can over this year. Let's get the community as engaged as we can, and really kind of reaffirm our values as a community.
Right.
And that's what a master plan really is. If you think about it, it's, what do we like about where we are as a community? What might we want to change? How do we see ourselves moving forward?
Yeah.
And in order for the master plan to have legitimacy and integrity, it really needs for the community to write it, right? Yeah. So we have 41,000 people here in Beverly. 41,000 people aren't coming to a meeting, right? However, our real charge is to try to make sure that every demographic, every neighborhood, every age group, every way that you might categorize yourself by interest, that every type of point of view is at that table over the next 8-9 months. And that's our goal. That's why we're here today, is we need your help in getting the word to people, and we need the community's help in coming to the table and writing this plan. The kind of things that we expect to be talking about are conversations around our neighborhoods, around housing, around preservation, around growth. What's our right formula for all of the things that are happening and could happen? We know, for example, that housing costs are a challenge. What are the right ways to address those? We know we have a growing senior population as the baby boomers move into retirement. We know that our ability to provide services year to year locally, and that's what local government does.
That's right.
Our ability to provide services relies heavily on our ability to generate economic investment and reinvestment in what you term new growth in a community, because we're a community that, by our demographics, doesn't get a lot of help from the state. So there's a lot to talk about here. With the current master plan, one of its priorities was to identify opportunities for transit-oriented development. In other words, where we see a housing need, try to focus it near public transportation. Another value in the existing master plan is trying to identify and protect open spaces, which I think we've done well with, but there's more to do. And there's a lot to it, but the real key is we need people to get involved. We need people to come next Tuesday night, May 14th. But if they can't, as Darlene said, there'll be online survey opportunities. We'll be going out trying to find people. But as much as people can plug in, that's the best. The best for the community. Bringing in as many stakeholders, so everybody has some skin in the game, and everybody's point of view is taken into account. Now, we're going to talk, as long as we're talking about development and things going on in the city. Let me just, I have a few things here that maybe you can give us an update on, and you and Darlene. The Briscoe repurposing. I don't know, I think you guys are writing an RFP, hasn't been written yet. Give us, what's the status of that? You want to touch on it, and then I will?
Sure. I mean, we are in the process of finalizing an RFP. I think we've been working on it, trying to craft an RFP that's flexible, but speaks to the goals that were expressed at some of the public meetings we've had in the last year regarding what people want to see at Briscoe.
And can you share with us, because you're going to put those stipulations kind of into the RFP. What might some of those be?
Well, there was preservation certainly of the building was a clear interest. I think housing, Aaron's writing it a little bit more, but maybe some housing for seniors, some community uses within the building.
Right. So those will be getting extra points in the.
There's a way
RFP,
to figure out which things, we want, but maybe understanding that not every respondent is going to be able to provide all of those things.
Sure.
So.
Well, you can never say too many times, what we've learned, right? Because people ask again and again. We initially spent about a year, we put a group together, spent almost a year looking at what we should do with Briscoe, City Hall, and the police station. Because there was a sentiment, well, maybe we should move City Hall over there and build a new police station over there. And we looked at that because there was a real appeal to that. We decided we couldn't afford to do it because there were two basic options. Build a new police station at the front of Cummings Center because the city owns 2 acres of land that currently is parking lot at the front of the campus there. To build that new police station and to rehab the existing police station into city offices, is expected to cost us $28 to $30 million. Call it $30 million. To renovate Briscoe and to add a police station either within the footprint of the building or next to it was going to cost about $60 million. So 30 or 60.
Yeah.
And that decision made itself.
Yeah.
Because to go to the community and ask for double the money to do the same thing, in a sense, just it couldn't work. The school committee surplused the building. The city council surplused the building. We look at it and we realize that we really shouldn't, and I don't think could do well, the role of long-term landlord on a building that needs a lot of attention, a lot of investment. So we've decided to sell the building. As Darlene said, worked with the community to figure out what the values are. And the first one is to save the building. It's not to be torn down, it's to be redeveloped, rehabbed.
Yeah.
Second was to not lose the green space around the building. The field out behind the building, that's something we intend to keep ownership of and keep as a city field. As much of the green space in front of the building we hope to keep as well. The uses that will be acceptable in the RFP, again, based on some meetings with neighbors in the community at large, potential for a hotel, potential for office space, potential for senior affordable housing, not high-end market rate housing, affordable housing. One type of housing that we are desperately short of is affordable options for seniors.
Yeah.
So those are the things that in the RFP somebody can come back and respond with, either one or the other or some combination. And then we also expect that we'll have a need for programming space in the building for senior programming. The Council on Aging building and space and campus, it's very space constricted.
Yeah.
So we think that we may be actually somebody who rents and uses space in the building for a long time to come as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I had on my list to ask you about the police station. You touched on it briefly. You want to add anything more to that, Mike?
Sure. So the city owns 2 acres of land at the front of Cummings. If you're looking at the Cummings Center from Stop and Shop, you see the ATM building right up front. And from there over to the train tracks we own. That's where we'll build the building. So we've been working for, over a year now. We hired a project manager, an architect, and now we've just hired a construction manager. And we just completed schematic design, which means now we look to really nail down the cost of the building. And then that team puts together the construction documents. Our hope is to be in the ground before the end of the fall, starting construction, for a building that the police department can move into by spring of 2021. So it'll be about a year and a half of construction, maybe a bit less. We'll be going to the city council next month for a loan order request to fund the building. Right. By the end of this month, the cost estimates will be refined to the point where we can go to the council and ask for the approval for the bond. Yeah.
So we're sitting here, it's spring 2019, so in about 2 years you expect that the police department will be moved in there, and wonderful. Now, something that's been kind of on the docket for decades, I think, what we refer to fondly as the McDonald's building, the McDonald's site at the base of the Beverly-Salem Bridge. And I think we have a signed lease, correct? And so tell us about what Mr. Bloom, the developer there, tell us what's happening there, Mr. Mayor. Or Darlene, you want to jump in on that? Either one.
Okay. Actually, Aaron Clausen, our planning director, and I went into Boston yesterday, met with officials at the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs and Mr. Bloom and his team to look at the state permitting requirements. Something that we'd done a few years ago as a city in preparation for this. We worked with the state to try to streamline the permitting. There are 2 big state permits that are needed. MEPA, which is an environmental assessment of the property, and Chapter 91, actually a license that's needed that requires and ensures public access and enjoyment along the waterfront. So those 2 processes are really the biggest challenge for the developer. He'll get that Chapter 91 license and he'll get the MEPA approvals. It's a question of how much work is entailed and how much time, because our goal is to help him get in the ground before winter. We, the city, will take down the building, which was part of the agreement we made. We made that decision some time ago, and so when we put the RFP out, anybody who responded knew that the city would make the site ready for construction.
Yeah.
So we'll be taking the building down at some point this year, again in hopes that by late November, early December, they'll be able to start construction, hopefully before the ground freezes and and it's harder to do things, because the goal has been and continues to be that they can open sometime in 2020.
Yeah. And of course, I think one of the things the city did even before that was to get rid of the designated port
It's
area.
been a journey.
Yeah.
When I took office in 2014, we immediately applied to the state to eliminate the designated port area.
Is that limited? Tell us how that limited. Tell our viewers how that limited development.
The designated port area is a statute that's about 40 years old, and it was passed to try to protect working waterfronts, protect the marine economy. The problem was Beverly's harborfront didn't have that anymore. It was long gone.
Yeah.
And our DPA actually includes a residential neighborhood around the corner from the condos, right? The Tuck Point condos, the single-family homes next to it, and then the couple of commercial, the one commercial lobstering dock that the Borellis own, and then the rest of the property through the McDonald's property. So it really hadn't functioned that way in 50 or 60 years, and the state agreed it wasn't likely to come back. So they removed that, and that just took restrictions off the property, which made it easier to travel the path of getting the restaurant in. We also had to work with the state quite a bit about how the public access can be provided on site. And so that's a part of the conversation that we had yesterday as well with the state officials.
Yeah. Now, there's a couple of things that are going on very close to the high school. Our studio here is in the high school. Maybe, Darlene, you can talk about the so-called Whole Foods mall there at the corner of Brimble and 128. There's a lot of construction. When will we be able to go in there and buy a loaf of bread?
Well, not quite yet. We were always told that Whole Foods takes a little bit longer on their interior fit out of their space than, say, a normal store you might expect. So you might have noticed the bank is open. The developers will be looking for the occupancy permits for a number of the other retail stores in the coming months. They've actually requested a meeting with us to try and wrap up loose ends related to that.
Right.
But they did say that they don't expect Whole Foods to be open until the fall.
Yeah. And of course, that's North Shore Bank there that just recently they announced a merger with Beverly Bank that's just kind of in the process of happening. Can you share, can you share with us who some of the other tenants might be there in that mall?
I don't have a full list, but I know that there's a fitness studio going in, there's a coal-fired pizza place, I believe there's a liquor store, and a Verizon store.
All the necessities of life.
There's a pet store as well.
Is there a pet store as well? Yeah.
You wouldn't buy a pet there, but pet supplies.
Pet supply store, yes.
All the necessities of life.
Right.
Why go further? Now, right near here, there's that big pie-shaped lot at the corner of Tozer and Sawyer. That there's been a lot of talk about that, and I know that Harbor Lake Community Partners. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, they have an approved permit from the city to do 75 units of affordable housing there. So family housing that would be affordable to families and also some single households or smaller households. It's a 40R district, and so as a result of that, the city putting that in place, we will, when it's built and occupied, there will be some funds that come back to the city in exchange for providing affordable family housing. And right now they are looking for they need a lot of funding to put this together. Not just they've come to the Affordable Housing Trust and have a promise of some funds from the Affordable Housing Trust as well as the Community Preservation Act. So they have some local funds which they've used to try and leverage state and federal funds, and they're waiting to hear about the rest of their funding package.
Yeah, and now there is some work going on Cabot Street between where Brown's Bicycles used to be and down, 2 blocks down from there. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How long might that be?
So that's our Cabot Street project. Right. So the Rantoul Street corridor was redone with almost $21 million of I say state and federal money, but it's our money. It's the gas taxes we pay, and it comes back to us. But that was federally and state funded, and so that was done. We're going to next spring start construction on the Henry's intersection, the intersection by the Golf and Tennis Club on Balch, by Balch and McKay, and the intersection at the foot of the Beverly Salem Bridge. And I say these because these are TIP funded. These are state and federal funds that we get we get approved, we get in line for, and then they come eventually, right? The same type of funding will pay for Bridge Street in Ryleside from the Danvers line down to the Bolomat. Yeah. And we're in line for those. The funding for the 3 intersections I mentioned, that's ours. They're planning to advertise the job later this fall and start it next spring. Yeah. The Bridge Street money is promised to us for fiscal year 2023, and we're working to try to move that up and get it to happen sooner. I mention that because we could try to go that route for Cabot Street, but we'd be about 7, 8, 10 years out. So we're trying to do Cabot Street on our own so that it doesn't have to wait. We got a state grant for Complete Streets to help with Cabot Street. And so we're doing it in chunks, right? So we're doing, as you said, from by where Brown's Bikes was down to where A&B Burgers is.
Right.
So that's the stretch that we'll be doing this year. And people see it already because a lot of the work has started. It's all the work under the street that's going on now.
Yeah.
The gas company's putting in new lines. The city's about to put in a new, not put in a new water main, but cement line the existing water main to extend its life by hopefully 40, 50 years. And that work's going on now. Once the under the street work is done, then the pavement will be taken out and there'll be a regrading of the street and a rebuilding from the front of building to the front of building. So it'll be sidewalks, curbs, and pavement. And we'll have new street lights, new trees, new what you call street furniture, things like bike racks and plantings and other things.
Excellent.
Did I miss anything there, Darlene?
Yeah.
No, I mean, well, I'd just add that we are also, we'll be gaining significant sidewalk area on some of the locations. It's usually going to happen on the church side, not on the restaurant side.
Okay, yeah.
But we'll be, might be some additional area for kind of public gathering space, or hoping maybe we'll find some areas to do public art.
Yeah. Now,
and I left out one of the major goals of this. I said complete streets. A big part of this is to really create more safety downtown for pedestrians and bicyclists, and more sense of place downtown. Yep. For what, it's 80, 90 years, the automobile's been bombing up and down the streets all over this country, and pedestrians have had to look out for it. So this is really about slowing the traffic in our downtown, because there's a lot of civic life and a lot of economic life that goes on down there.
Right.
So a big part of this is making the space safer for everyone who uses it.
Yeah, very important. Now you mentioned a couple of intersections like the Henrys. What might we see? What's the?
You doing this? What do you want a roundabout?
Is that a gift? Is that?
Yeah, you made a circle.
I know that the exit 18 Essex Street is just wonderful. That's just that. So is that something that you're thinking about, putting a rotary in that?
I mean, I see roundabouts work really well, and in fact, the state requires you to look at roundabouts whenever you look at intersections. Yeah. Unfortunately, you need a good amount of right-of-way. You need a good amount of space that you own. I'm doing this because, to make it work. At Henry's, in order to put a roundabout at that intersection, Henry's would lose most of their parking. The bank would lose all of their parking. It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So, no, this is a rebuild of a signalized intersection that is calculated by the engineers to work a whole lot better. And the goal is to move more vehicles more efficiently at each light cycle and more safely.
Yeah, I know, because if you're coming down Cabot from 128 and you're waiting at that light, sometimes you wait 3 or 4 light cycles there before you can get through.
So one of our goals is to try to, there's better technology than exists right now there. But with better technology and design, the goal is to move more cars through more efficiently, to ease congestion in those intersections, among other things.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of topics today. Thank you for all of that good information. And I'd like to thank my guest, Mayor Mike Cahill, and Darlene Wynn, Assistant Planning Director for the City of Beverly, for all this good information. And I'd like to tell our viewers you've been watching City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski, and we'll see you next time.